It's personal to you, but I don't think it's personal. Okay, let me hear your submission on the fact that the matter is personal to you first.
Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleagues, my name is Ali Yusani Madaki, and I represent the Alapero constituency of Kano State. Mr. Speaker, I take this matter to be very, very personal and dear to my heart because it affects the well-being and even the coexistence of Nigeria as a country. And I don't think there is anything that can be more personal than the relationship between one Nigerian or the other, or anybody bringing anything that will disrupt our fault lines, especially issues that has to do with religion, Mr. Speaker. That is why I believe this issue is very personal to me, and it should be very personal to you and all other members that are seated here. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, if you allow me in 2-3 minutes, I will be done with my personal explanation.
Honorable Madaki, I've seen it, but it's generic. It's not something that is personal to you, really. That is the problem I have with the matter. It's not personal to you. Okay, read the order on personal matters. Let's hear you. Can you use your mic, please?
By the indulgence of the House and the leave of the Speaker, a member may make personal explanation, although there be no question before the House, but no controversial matter may be brought forward, or any debate arise upon the explanation.
Okay. By ordinary dictionary definition, you know, personal, something that's personal to you means it's personal. But if it affects all of us, then it's no longer personal to you. That's the question. So I guess it's better you come by way of emotion. Then it's not personal. Please, let's not argue about that. So, you see me later. Honorable colleagues, the first order of the day is commencement of debate on the general principles of a bill for an act to establish the Nigeria Council for Social Works to regulate the practice of professional social work in Nigeria and for related matters, standing in the name of Honorable Osai, Nicholas Osai. Honorable members will recall that the bill was read the first time on Wednesday, 21st March 2018. I now invite Honorable Osai to move the bill be now read the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished honorable colleagues. I remain Honorable Osai, Nicholas Osai. I represent the Federal Constituency of Delta State. Mr. Speaker, you are aware that this is override, and the reason for vetoing this bill has also not been communicated to me as a person to be able to use it to convince the House the need to override, Mr. President. I believe we should step it down for now so that such reasons can be communicated to me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Item 1 on the other paper, stepped down by leave of the House. Second order of the day, honorable colleagues, is the commencement of debate on the general principles of Bill for an Act to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and enact Honorable Betty Amboma. Deputy Minority Whip. Deputy Minority Whip. Honorable Betty, is it that you don't have seat on the floor? Do you want me to allocate a seat to you? Okay, please take your seat. The KB State Caucus. Honorable Farouk. Okay. I think we can now move on. The second order of the day is commencement of debate on the general principles of Bill for an Act to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and enact the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Bill to provide measures for the prohibition, prevention, and combating of terrorist activities in Nigeria and for related matters. Standing in the name of Honorable Kayode Oladele, honorable members who recall the bill was read the first time on Thursday, 25th January 2018. I now invite Honorable Oladele to move that the bill be now read the second time. Honorable Kayode, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Kayode Oladele, and I represent Yewa North and Imekwa from Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I'm from Ogun State, and I rise to move that a bill for an act to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and enact the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Bill to provide for measures for prevention and combating of terrorist activities in Nigeria and for related matters, HB 1296, be read the second time. I so move.
Honorable Shuaibu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my dear honorable colleagues. My name is Abdurrahman Shuaibu. I represent Mubi North, Mubi South, and Maiha Federal Constituency. I'm from Adamawa State. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion as moved by Honorable Kayode Oladele for the bill to be read the second time. I so second.
Honorable Kayode, please lead the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, I seek your valued support to allow this bill to be read a second time. The bill seeks to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2011 as amended and enact the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2018 to provide for measures for the detection, prevention, enforcement, combating, and prohibition of acts of terrorism for the effective implementation of international instruments on the prevention and combating of terrorism and suppression of the financing of terrorism. In addition, the bill seeks to establish institutional frameworks, including the Nigerian Sanctions Committee for the implementation, coordination, and enforcement of its provisions. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I have the brief in your hands. While I seek to adapt everything in the brief, I would like to respectfully state the objectives of the bill. The purpose of the bill, Mr. Speaker, which is a justice sector bill, and which has been drawn and has been on the drawing table since 2013, is among other things, one, to harmonize the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and the Terrorism Prevention Amendment Act 2013, and to correct the numbering challenges in the existing legal frameworks. Repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2011 as amended. Provide for enhanced measures for the detection, prevention, combating, and prohibition of acts of terrorism, and ensure the effective implementation of the international instruments on the prevention and combating of terrorism and suppression of the financing of terrorism generally, and establish institutional frameworks, including the Nigeria Sanctions Committee, for the implementation, coordination, and enforcement of its provisions. Mr. Speaker, I adopt the background which we all have, but I will also, respectfully, Mr. Speaker, state some fundamental changes which are incorporated into the bill. Following the receipt of the comments on the bill from the UNODC and Terrorism Prevention Branch and Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorates, in 2015, the Ministry of Justice, in collaboration with the PCA, the Presidential Committee on Financial Action Task Force, in February 2015, constituted a technical working team of draft persons to consider the comments of UNODC on the bill and incorporate its recommendations where necessary. Mr. Speaker, as well as research into and development of weapons without lawful authority and the receipt, possession, use, transfer, alteration, disposal, or disposal of nuclear or other radioactive materials or devices. 2. Any act which is deliberately done with malice aforethought and which involves causes the releasing into the environment or any part thereof, or distributing or exposing the public or any part to dangerous, hazardous, nuclear, or other radioactive or harmful substance, or any toxic chemical, any microbial or other biological agent or toxin, the effect of which is to endanger human life or to provoke substantial damage to property or to the environment. Mr. Speaker, it also includes any act which is deliberately done with malice aforethought and involves or causes are directed against a nuclear facility or act interfering with the operation of a nuclear facility where the offender intentionally causes or where he knows that the act is likely to cause death or serious injuries to persons. Mr. Speaker, unlike before, we now have the offense of hostage taking, kidnapping, and hijacking as part of the offenses included in the acts of terrorism in the Terrorism Prevention and Provision Bill. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, as I said, I have this already distributed to members. All I want to request is your support to ensure that this bill, which has been in the offing, in the drawing table for the past 5 years, is allowed to go for second reading. I so submit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Pajok.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, Honorable colleagues. Mr. Speaker, my name is Edward Pajok. I represent the south-east of Plateau State. Mr. Speaker, let me commend Honorable Kayode for bringing this executive bill to harmonize different sections of the bill, including bringing the bill in tandem with international best practices. Mr. Speaker, in view of the insecurity that we are faced with as a country, this bill could not have come at a better time. It's our hope that when this bill becomes a law, it will address the multifaceted issues of insecurity in the country. The bill will certainly go to the committee stage, which is headed by Honorable Kayode. I, however, want to add some issues that I think submit should be treated at the committee stage. Mr. Speaker, one of them is the issue of trial. Mr. Speaker, as a country, we have this very notorious practice, that is our prosecuting agencies and investigating agencies where you go and arrest a suspect and then carry out the investigation later. Mr. Speaker, that is not allowed even by our constitution. It is my prayer that the federal government will empower the police, the SSS, and all the other security agencies which are involved in investigating terrorism-related offenses, so that by the time a suspect is arrested, investigation ought to have concluded. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important area, because we find out that, yes, there are so many attacks, there are so many terrorist activities in the country, but how many convictions has Nigeria been able to secure as a matter of fact because of terrorist-related activities? The answer is very, very minimal. And the answer is simple, is because we do not conduct thorough investigation before we send accused persons for trial. So yes, we may have improved upon know the law, but the truth is that if we do not obtain the necessary hardware, the recent gadgets that are necessary for investigation, we may not go
order, honorable colleagues, order,
conviction of suspects. Again, Mr. Speaker, the issue of trial is also very, very important. The issue of bail, the issue of fair hearing for even the accused persons is very, very important. The practice where someone will be arrested and kept behind bars for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, just because he's facing very grievous charge, Mr. Speaker, should not be condoned in this day and age. Again, it's a matter for the prosecuting agencies, and I hope that this will also be incorporated in this law, because the most important law is the Constitution. The Constitution says for a very serious offense, like capital offenses, you have 2 months within which someone can be held in detention without being taken into court. After 2 months, any accused person ought to be taken into court. What have we done by way of this bill or in the act to ensure that we act within the confines of the Constitution? And I do think that just to say we will take accused persons only to magistrate court on holding charges, we all know that is no more allowed. But till today, that matter is still the practice of the police. So I hope that this particular bill will address this very serious issue, so that when an accused person is accused of terrorism in the country, I urge my colleagues to pass this bill, and we will scrutinize it rigorously at the committee stage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Yakub.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My name is Yakub Abiodun Balogun, representing the very industrious people of Lagos Island to Federal Constituency. I am from Lagos State. I rise to give my support to this bill moved by Honorable Kayode Oladele, particularly as the bill seeks to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and reenact the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act accordingly. I want to lend my support because the bill has specifically come out with issues to ameliorate the situations surrounding hijacking and kidnapping. Hitherto, we did not have any bill like this to deal with the issue of Evans that enjoyed kidnapping Nigerians and exploiting the situation. In the light of this, I want to congratulate the mover of the bill, the presenter, and to wish to lend the support of all my constituents towards the repeal of the 2011 Terrorism Prevention Act and reenact the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Acts accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable MT.
Honorable Speaker, honorable members, my name is Mohamed Tahir Munguno. I represent Marje Munguno, Nganze Federal Constituency of Borno State. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, as a representative that is representing a constituency that is ravaged by high incidence of insurgency, I wholeheartedly support the second reading of this bill, especially against the backdrop of the fact that Boko Haram operates like a coffee cat. Whatever sister insurgents in other jurisdictions do, Boko Haram tends to replicate same in Nigeria. For example, the issue of chemical weapons that is hitherto not incorporated into our Prevention and Prohibition of Terrorism Act, issues of kidnapping, issues of hijacking that were initially not included in our Prohibition and Prevention of Terrorism Act is what this bill seeks to include in tandem with international best practice. And this is purely because, as I said earlier on, whatever other insurgency groups like ISIS, like El-Shabaab, like Taliban in Afghanistan do, is what exactly Boko Haram tends to replicate in Nigeria. And if these offenses are not adequately incorporated into our Prohibition and Prevention of Terrorism Act, then there is no way we can successfully prosecute people that have committed such offenses. So against this backdrop, I wholeheartedly support the second reading of this bill so that the Prevention and Prohibition of Terrorism Act in Nigeria will be in tandem with international best practice. Thank you.
Don't disturb the speaker.
Chair, Foreign Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for yielding to me. My name is Nenna Iledu-KJ, Nenna member representing Bende Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm from Abia State. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commend the author of this bill for bringing this amendment to the House of Representatives, and of course, this is our legislative input to the counter-terrorism war. Mr. Speaker, I have had cause to read through the bill and listen, of course, to the arguments that are canvassed around the floor. And anything in any way which is our contribution to this counter-terrorism war is welcome in the country. However, Mr. Speaker, I have read the bill, and it says, and I quote from the compendium, that the bill benefited from global legislations on the subject matter, including from jurisdictions such as the United States, the UK, South Africa, Kenya, etc., etc. But, Mr. Speaker, the problem with this expanded definition of terrorism is the fact that even these clients have thrown up concerns about the human rights concerns contained herein. The expanded definition of terrorism says anyone, under any guise, who may be seen. Now, of course, these people have strong institutions. There's the difference between the police, the investigative arms, and very strong legal systems. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think, as Chairman Human Rights said, that we must incorporate the human rights angle into this bill. We must look at this bill in such a way that creates a safety net for people, so that this omnibus definition of terrorism is not such a dragnet that gathers everybody and gives them, and then they are presumed guilty of terrorism. I believe that if we expand it as much as we want to expand it, there must be safety nets that ensure that we're able to create the necessary roadblocks that do not give this omnibus carte blanche to people to name anybody under any guise a terrorist. I would say that this is a fantastic bill because it is the latest intervention, and like you said, it is one that has been used around the world. It is one that is adopted from global legislation. But I believe that we must look at the Nigerian issue, our issue of our institutions. We must find a way to look at our issues. These are international conventions, but they must have a homegrown flair. So I'm hoping that when we get to the committee stages, that there would be a clause that would highlight the human rights concerns of all the other countries where this particular convention was adopted from. Because in those countries, the next step of this convention is that they have had to add the...
Members.
The next amendment to this amendment in other climes where we brought this amendment from is that there's actually the third step, which looks at the human rights angle, which looks at protecting the people who come in from other countries, the aid workers, and so on and so forth. So I believe
it's too much.
Look at it in an omnibus manner, bring in those amendments so that they protect the people and then mitigate the abuse of this broad definition of terrorism. Thank you very much.
Honorable Rotimi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, dear colleagues. My name is Prince Rotimi Agunsoye, representing Kushofe Federal Constituency of Lagos. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill. The bill providing measures to prohibit, prevent, and combat terrorist activities in Nigeria. My contribution here will have to do with the porosity of our borders. If you are considering this, they must consider in the nitty-gritty of the bill, we can take care of our borders that are porous. And also, we need to have database of Nigerians, those that are truly Nigerians, because people will be coming from neighboring countries. They will be coming from neighboring countries to, to do so many dangerous activities in Nigeria, whereby they will be referring to Nigerians as the ones, partaking in all these various activities. So, my point is that they should consider the porosity of our borders and having database for Nigeria, because we don't have database as we speak for Nigerians. Who are truly Nigerians? We do not know. So that is my contribution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Femi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm Olufemi Adebanjo. I represent Alimosho Federal Constituency of Lagos State. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, terrorism is a negative word, is the worst word anybody can use. Terrorism is about sadness, pain. Terrorism brings no joy to no nation. Terrorism brings no joy to the whole world. Terrorism is about bloodshed, killing of innocent citizens, making people sad, sending people to the grave on untimely death, and so on. That is the reason why I'm supporting this motion. And I pray that we'll have enough law to deter people from committing all these kinds of atrocities in the nation or in the whole world. I also pray that we should allow death penalty for those who are caught transacting, dealing in terrorism. Thank you very much. Honorable Arabu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues, Simon Arabo is my name. I represent Kauru Federal Constituency. The foot of the law of terrorism in one act. I support the second reading of this bill because it seeks to incorporate the relevant sections on terrorism in one bill, instead of what was done in 2015 or thereabout, when the amendment was more than even the extant law. So I support the second reading of this bill because it is long overdue. There was a workshop sometime, and it was observed that that amendment should actually be a repeal and reenactment, not an amendment. So what this current bill seeks to do is to do the needful. On that basis, I support the second reading of this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I remain Representative Idigia, representing the very good people of Bariki Ladurium Federal Constituency. I'm from Plateau State. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I rise to lend my voice to this very important bill and to say that I've noted the definition of what constitutes acts of terrorism. And to say, Mr. Speaker, that I would be recommending that at the committee stage, there will be need to further expand the definition of terrorism to capture the twin evils of insurgency and violent attacks, which today constitute the greatest threat to our security as a nation. To that extent, as I said at the committee stage, the definition of terrorism should be expanded to incorporate acts of insurgency and all forms of violent attacks and displacement of people from their ancestral habitats, such that we can incorporate it for purposes of clarity and to avoid ambiguity. I support this bill, and Mr. Speaker said that at the committee stage, the definition should be expanded to clearly incorporate acts of insurgency and violent attacks which are occasioning mass displacement in our nation today. On that note, I support the passage of this bill on second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Any more contributions? So I'll put the question. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against it say nay. Ayes have it. Now I invite the clerk to read the long title of the bill.
Honorable Speaker, honorable members, a bill for an act to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and enact Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Bill to provide measures for the prohibition, prevention, and combating of terrorist activities in Nigeria and for related matters. Second reading.
Bill is referred to Committee on National Security and Intelligence. Honorable Ali Umadaki, your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleagues, I want to come under Order 6, Rule 1, privileges. Mr. Speaker, the matter I want to bring before the attention of this honorable House has to do with the breach of my privilege as a member of this House. Mr. Speaker, the last time I checked our Constitution, Nigeria, based on our Constitution, is a secular state. meaning it does not recognize any religion. Mr. Speaker, recently our president traveled to US. During their press briefing with the President of the United States of America, President Trump alluded to the fact that Christians are being killed in Nigeria. I feel that is a very, very wrong statement. Mr. Speaker, I know for a fact that Nigerians are being killed every day, everywhere. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, I have a copy of newspaper of yesterday talking about over 70 people killed yesterday in Kaduna, over 100 people killed recently in Zamfara. All these people do not carry religious tag. They must not